past exists. Rather, each of us creates our own past by what we remember. So I come from a Puerto Rican family, but ended up living in El Paso, Texas. And my father was a sergeant in the Army. And we had a very tempestuous family life. My father drank too much. He hit my mother. He hit me. It was kind of crazy. And as I became more educated and became smarter, my father began to have an issue with me. And he would call me, his words of derision were, "I'm a chicken shit lawyer." I had a brother, he's 4 years younger, Crucito. He had a horrible acne problem. Really bad, like he was about 14 years old, really bad. And my mother had heard from some of her friends that the best thing to put on horrible acne was this is like 1970s, was this medicine called Pazo, P-A-Z-O, which is actually a hemorrhoid medicine. So when I was thinking of putting together perhaps slides for my presentation, the one thing I really wanted was a picture of a tube of Pazo. But I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet, I think because the active ingredient in Pazo was banned by the FDA subsequently. So anyway, it's evening, and over the years I had developed this sense of my father's temperament, and he would walk in the room and I could tell that he was ready for a fight. And I could tell that was the case this evening. Meanwhile, my brother was wearing these great beige paisley pajama bottoms and a beautiful white t-shirt. And his face was speckled with Pazo. Sure enough, my father starts screaming at my mother. My antennae are up. I call the police show up, and they, just the very presence of the police would calm my father down. And the policeman says, standing in the foyer, "Can anybody here explain what's going on?" And my brother says, "Yes, I can." He raises his hand. Policeman says, "Speaks." My brother steps forward and he sees, "You see, officer, the problem is my sister is an intellectual." That is a true story. So being an intellectual, of course, I joined the CIA. And I'm in 1978, and I do pretty well because I'm smart. And in 1985, I'm taking a program on leadership that at the time was called Program on Creative Management. I think it's now called Program on Creative Leadership. It was a week-long program where people, you were in these groups and you had all these exercises, and there were lots of rooms with two-way mirrors where psychologists and psychiatrists were observing you. And so there was a guy in my group who hated me with a passion. He was one of these guys who thought he was an alpha male, but isn't. And the first encounter I had with him, he said to me, "You act like a refugee from a woman's assertiveness training course." True. I didn't cry that time. The next to the last day was devoted to the one-on-one counseling session with the psychiatrist. The next to the last day, I can't even remember what he said. I left the room in tears. What a defeat. I went to the bathroom. One of the counselors followed me because, they're probably thinking I'm going to get sued. Because they really let it get out of control. And they said to me, "Carmen, it's not you, it's him. He's the problem." Next day, I meet with the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist says, "Well, why didn't you yell at him? Why didn't you tell him off?" And then she has this inspiration. "Tell me about how you grew up." And I said, "Well, my father was an alcoholic and we had a lot of conflict." She goes, "Oh, you hate conflict. That's your problem. So I'm going to tell you, this is your homework assignment. Sometime in your life, you need to call somebody an asshole." I asked Saul if I could use that word. So, 20 years go by, and I'm having a very successful CIA career. I've actually become the Deputy Director of Analysis after being a heretic and a change agent and being called cynical and negative. I finally have my hands on the reins of power. And I've been 2 years in this position. Everyone knows I'm sort of a reformist. Well, not sort of, a reformist. And I actually am having this conversation with myself. I'm entering my 3rd year. I am really going to try to implement the things that I believe in. I get called up into someone's office more senior than me. I won't mention this person's name. And they said that they want me to leave that position and take another position, which was a lot like what Whitney was talking about, not as prestigious a position. And this man said to me, the reason why we want you to take another position is we don't think you're hard enough. And I thought, in a way, that was good news, because I wasn't aiming for hard, right? And these were the same people that when we talked about things like the Gallup survey in the workplace, and there were results that the employees at CIA weren't that happy, I heard them say in the room, I don't care about my employees being happy. I just want them to get the mission done. And sometimes when you're a rebel at work or you think differently, people that have very important positions will say something to you like that, and then you have this self-doubt. You think, well, I must be the one that's wrong. It must be me that is wrong to think that maybe happy employees would be more productive. But the odd thing about that is the job that I went to had a real outward-facing orientation. In other words, I got to meet with the public in that job. I have a lot of friends now who are retiring from CIA, and they can't escape their CIA identity. They don't have any other identity. But while I was at the agency, I started to develop a different identity. And so actually, it turned out to be a good thing, and a first step in what is now my lifelong goal, so that when I die, my obituary does not read former CIA executive. So I got back to the CIA. A few years after that, I had retired, and there was a community-wide session on rebels at work in the intelligence community who were collaborating, a mini BIF, kind of biffy, I love that adjective, to come up with best practices and steal everybody's ideas. And this guy comes up to me. I had known him at the agency, but I hadn't known him well. He was that kind of strange category of relationship. Oh, he wasn't even that strange category of relationship, a work friend, right? He was just a colleague. He'd never impressed me as a very aggressive person or even particularly, intelligent. He wasn't a leader in his craft. I did not mean it for it to sound that way, but darn. So he comes up to me after the session, and he says, Carmen, you totally changed my life. And I went, well, what do you mean, Tom? And he goes, when you were still here, I heard you speak about how analysts needed to be more creative. And for our analysis to become better, we had to become more creative. And it really made an impact on me. So I found the only school at the time that has a master's course in creativity. And I got the CIA to pay for it. And now I run the creativity program at the CIA Professional Training School. And I was like, it just totally blew my mind. So 18 months ago, Steve Blank asked me to be interviewed on his Sirius XM course, Entrepreneurs Everywhere. And he's a very professional guy. The producer interviews you, sends you a list of questions. It's fun, and then you go into the XM studios for the interview to be taped. It's not done live. And that's actually the first time I meet him face-to-face, and he's a leading thinker in entrepreneurship. And he says, I know we went through all these questions, and I'm going to go through them all, but, there's one question I'd really like to ask you that was not on that list. So can I ask it to you now? And I go, sure. And he goes, can you describe your childhood to me? What was it like? Was it calm? And I go, well, no, it wasn't. It was, everything that I've been telling you about. It was crazy, and the police would come. And he said, aha, I knew it. And he goes, and I go, what? He says, I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs, and time after time, I find that they have had volatile childhoods. And he said, my theory is that when you as a child have that kind of experience, that your emotional and social intelligence becomes highly tuned. You read people very well, and that becomes a very valuable skill as a change maker and as an entrepreneur. So my kind of hiring advice to you all, although I don't know that you can get away with it, is when you're interviewing someone, have them, just ask them, hey, what was your childhood like, right? So, let's review. What are the lessons that we've learned? If you really think you're the smartest person in the room, it's up to you to make the conversation real with other people. 2, some people deserve to be called assholes. 3, but sometimes those assholes can open up unexpectedly a door for you, but you will only see that door if you're looking forward. 4, if you speak your truth powerfully, honestly, and clearly, somebody will hear you, even if you don't know at the time who they are. And 5, and I'm paraphrasing the great Meg Wheatley here, live your life with confidence, knowing every step you take gets you closer to understanding the purpose of your life. Thank you.